Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
When my own mother turned her face away as I packed my bags, I swear something inside me snapped like a brittle old branch during a winter storm. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was just an embarrassment with a baby bump. That's what it boiled down to. 28 years of being the good girl, the reliable daughter, the polite churchgoer, the one who always helped with Sunday dinners and smiled through family photos, gone in an instant, because I had the audacity to get pregnant without a damn ring on my finger. I still remember the exact moment it happened. The kitchen smelled like burned toast and furniture polish, and the late afternoon sun was hitting the linoleum just right, like it always did in early spring. My father sat at the table in his usual seat, elbows on the worn oak, hands folded like he was about to say grace. But there was no grace in that room. Just tension so thick you could slice it with a dull butter knife. He didn't even look at me. Not once. Just stared at the table like I wasn't even there. Like I was already a ghost in that house. My mother stood by the window, arms crossed, her eyes swollen and red, but she wasn't crying anymore. She'd run out of tears hours ago, maybe days ago. She'd already buried the version of me she thought she raised, the one who would marry a dentist or an accountant, have 2 kids in matching sweaters, and live in a beige house down the street. What she got instead was a daughter who had slept with a man who disappeared faster than a summer thunderstorm and came back from the doctor's office holding a sonogram photo and shaking hands. "I can't believe you're doing this," she said finally, her voice brittle and sharp, like cracked porcelain. "You're throwing your whole life away." "No," I said, my throat dry like sandpaper. "I'm saving it." That was the last thing I said before I zipped up my duffel bag and picked up my coat. That coat was secondhand, too small across the belly now, but I didn't care. I held my head high even though I was shaking inside, even though my heart felt like it was cracking open with every step toward the door. "I want you to understand," my father said finally, his voice as flat and lifeless as a dead battery. "You are choosing this path. You are choosing to go against everything we believe in. And we cannot support that." Support. What a fucking word. They didn't mean financial support. They meant moral support, emotional support, the kind that's supposed to be unconditional when it comes from your parents. But I guess love in our house came with fine print. One mistake and you're out. No contact, no help, no visits. Just gone. Like I was some sort of leper they had to cast out before I contaminated the rest of the family name. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab that stupid centerpiece on the table and throw it at the wall. But I didn't. I didn't cry either. Not then. I just walked out. One step, then another. My hand on the doorknob, my breath stuck in my throat. And then I was outside, in the fresh air, in the cold, cruel world that wasn't expecting me, but wasn't rejecting me either. I didn't have a plan. All I had was $300 in my pocket, a used Toyota with rust on the bumper, and a body that was already starting to change in ways I couldn't control. I drove for hours with no destination in mind, just trying to keep moving so the reality wouldn't hit me all at once. But eventually, exhaustion caught up, and I pulled into a cheap roadside motel with flickering neon lights and a cracked ice machine that made more noise than it gave ice. The room smelled like old cigarettes and sadness. The bedspread looked like it hadn't been washed since the Bush administration. But I sat down on the edge of that mattress, clutching my stomach like it could anchor me to something real, and let the tears come, slow at first, then harder, until I couldn't breathe. I kept thinking about what they said. About how I was ruining my life. About how I was nothing without their approval. But even through the heartbreak, through the ache in my chest and the bitterness in my throat, there was something else blooming in me, a kind of stubborn fire I didn't know I had. They didn't want me anymore. Fine, but I still had someone who would. Someone who would look at me with eyes that didn't judge or shame. Someone who'd grow up knowing love, not conditions. I looked down at my belly and whispered, "You've got me. And I've got you." That night, as I lay under a scratchy motel blanket, staring at a water-stained ceiling and wondering if I'd just thrown my entire future away, I had no idea that everything was about to change in ways I couldn't even imagine. But first, I had to survive. And survival, I was about to learn, is messy, loud, ugly, and damn beautiful in its own way. And I would do it without them. There's something no one tells you about hitting rock bottom. It doesn't come with a loud crash or some dramatic music in the background like in the movies. No, it sneaks in slowly, like mold in the corners of your life, creeping up behind you while you're too tired to notice. Mine came wrapped in sour milk bottles, sleepless nights, and the smell of cheap baby powder mixed with desperation. I was alone, I was broke, and I was absolutely terrified, but somehow I kept going, one damn minute at a time. Raising a child with no support isn't just hard, it's soul-grinding, gut-wrenching, and humiliating in ways you can't describe until you've lived it. There were nights I rocked my son to sleep while crying silently into his blanket because I didn't know how I'd pay for formula the next day. There were days I'd pretend I wasn't hungry so I could stretch the last can of beans a little further. I stopped counting how many times I skipped dinner, how many times I watered down soup, how many times I cut open toothpaste tubes to scrape out just a little more. I stopped caring about dignity, because when you're a single mom with nothing, dignity is a luxury you can't afford. I named him Noah. He had these huge brown eyes that looked like they already knew too much about the world, and he was the only reason I didn't fall apart completely. He was my reason to wake up when I hadn't even slept, my reason to smile when my body wanted to collapse, my reason to believe in something better even when reality slapped me across the face daily. That boy, he didn't know it yet, but he was the glue holding me together, piece by broken piece. I did whatever work I could find. I cleaned toilets in motels where the guests treated me like furniture. I scrubbed floors for rich women who wouldn't even look me in the eye as they sipped wine and gossiped about their Pilates instructors. I sold handmade soaps on Etsy, praying someone would buy enough to keep the lights on for one more week. I took every shift I could, every scrap of opportunity, no matter how small or humiliating. My hands were raw, my back ached constantly, and my feet felt like they'd never stop hurting, but I never once let my son see me fall apart. The worst part wasn't the work. It wasn't the pain or the exhaustion or the constant anxiety that twisted in my gut like a knife. The worst part was knowing that my family was out there, living their neat, judgmental lives like I had never existed. My sister got married in a lavish ceremony with a band and an open bar, and I only knew because someone tagged her on Facebook. My parents were busy hosting church fundraisers and playing perfect grandparents to my sister's kids while pretending mine didn't even exist. They smiled in photos, posted Bible quotes about forgiveness and family, and pretended the daughter they threw away hadn't once begged them for help when she had nothing but a newborn and a half-empty fridge. I'd be lying if I said I never fantasized about showing up on their doorstep just to see the look on their faces. But I never did. Not once. I told myself it was pride. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was that deep, raw wound that hadn't scarred over yet, the one that reminded me I'd been abandoned when I needed them most. And some betrayals don't deserve a second chance. Still, there were moments when I'd sit by the window late at night, holding Noah while he slept, and wonder what they'd say if they saw us. If they knew how much I'd endured. If they knew I was still standing, still fighting, still trying to raise a boy who would grow up knowing how to love without strings attached. Be honest, have you ever had someone cut you out of their life over a mistake? Have you ever been thrown away just because you didn't fit into someone else's idea of acceptable? What would you do if they came crawling back only after you didn't need them anymore? Would you forgive them? Or would you make them feel every inch of the pain they made you carry alone? Drop your thoughts below, I want to hear your stories. Anyway, life kept dragging forward. Bills kept piling up. Noah grew out of clothes faster than I could afford to replace them. There were good days too, moments that made the rest bearable. A baby laugh, a kind stranger, a warm cup of coffee I didn't have to share. But mostly it was survival. Just that. Survival on fumes, hope stretched thin, and a heart that wouldn't quit no matter how much it hurt. And then, one Thursday afternoon, right after I'd finished mopping the floor of a diner that paid me less than minimum wage and smelled like fried regret, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer it. I figured it was another bill collector or some scam about extending my car warranty. but something in me said pick it up. "Hello?" I said, holding the phone between my shoulder and my ear while wiping my hands on my apron. The voice on the other end was calm, polite, almost too cheerful. "Is this Ms. Lauren Miller?" "Yes," I said slowly, not sure what to expect. "I'm calling from the State Lottery Commission. I just need to verify some information regarding your ticket." I stood frozen in that empty diner, surrounded by the smell of grease and stale coffee, and for the first time in years, I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or fall to my knees. Something was about to change, but I had no idea just how much. It's strange how sometimes the most life-altering moments don't feel like fireworks or thunderclaps or music swelling in the background like you'd expect from a movie scene. Sometimes they feel like absolute silence, like a long pause after a deep breath you didn't know you were holding. That's exactly what it felt like when I got the call that changed everything. But let me back up a bit, because the way it started was so small, so unremarkable, I almost didn't even remember it afterward. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I'd just gotten off a double shift cleaning offices in a corporate building that smelled like stale printer ink and desperation. My back hurt, my feet were screaming, and I had exactly $20 to my name after putting gas in my car and grabbing a few groceries. I stopped at a gas station on the way home, not because I needed anything, but because I just wanted a minute to breathe in a place where no one was asking anything of me. I bought a cheap cup of coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard and a gas station sandwich that was probably older than my kid's favorite toy. And then, almost as a joke, I grabbed a lottery ticket from behind the counter. $5, I said, handing over my last crumpled bill like it was a poker chip in some kind of twisted game I was already losing. The cashier barely looked up as he printed the ticket, and I tucked it into my wallet between a half-used coupon and a faded photo of Noah sleeping on my chest when he was just a few weeks old. I didn't think about it again. Not really. I didn't sit around fantasizing or planning how I'd spend millions. I had diapers to buy, dishes to wash, and bills that didn't care about dreams. A week later, I found the ticket again while cleaning out my wallet. It was early in the morning, and Noah was still asleep, his hair sticking out in every direction like a baby rooster. I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to figure out how to stretch a pound of ground beef into 3 meals, when I remembered the numbers were being announced the night before. I pulled out my phone and checked the winning numbers, more out of boredom than anything else. The moment I saw the first number match, I squinted. By the time the second and third numbers matched, I felt something tighten in my chest. I checked again, and then once more, just to be sure I wasn't hallucinating or reading it wrong. All 6 numbers. Every damn one. I read them aloud in a whisper, then again louder, like saying them louder would make it more real. I didn't scream. I didn't run around the room. I didn't cry. I just sat there in the quiet, holding that little slip of paper in my shaking hands, staring at the microwave clock as if time itself was waiting for me to move. $42 million. I said it out loud, and it still didn't feel real. That number didn't even exist in my world until that moment. It sounded like something other people talked about: rich people, powerful people, people who didn't know what it meant to count every penny or ration baby formula or cry in the parking lot of a grocery store because their card got declined over a $12 total. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my coworkers, not even the woman next door who sometimes watched Noah for free when I needed to run errands. I cashed it in as anonymously as I could manage, got a financial planner, a lawyer, and a therapist all in the same week, because I knew damn well that money doesn't fix broken parts of you, it just makes you more aware of where the cracks already were. I moved into a house with a backyard that had a tree swing, a little porch where I could drink coffee without hearing sirens or screaming neighbors. I enrolled Noah in a preschool with actual learning materials instead of broken toys and distracted staff. I started planning for his future: therapy, college, travel, books, safety. I gave myself space to dream again, too. I started mapping out the bakery I'd always wanted to open, the one I used to imagine during sleepless nights when all I had was a notebook and a flickering ceiling fan. It was peace for the first time in years. Not luxury. Not glittering, champagne-soaked peace. Just breathing space. Just quiet. Just dignity. For the first time, I felt like I didn't have to constantly prove my worth just to survive another day. I wasn't running on fumes anymore. I was finally driving my own damn life, and no one else had a hand on the wheel. But life has a way of dragging ghosts out of the dark just when you think you've buried them deep enough. I should have known it wouldn't stay quiet forever. I should have expected that my name wouldn't stay hidden for long. One small leak, probably someone at the lottery office, or maybe a bank clerk with loose lips, and suddenly it was in the local paper, plain as day. Lauren Miller, single mother wins 42 million jackpot. And just like that, the calls started. From them. It didn't take long after my name hit the paper for the ghosts of my past to come crawling out of the shadows, like rats scurrying toward the scent of something rich and easy. I wasn't even surprised when my phone started ringing nonstop, unknown numbers, vague texts, old acquaintances I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembering how much they missed me. But the one that twisted something cold and sharp in my gut was the voicemail from my mother. Her voice came through the speaker like a broken record of selective memory, trembling, theatrical, soaked in forced emotion that might have meant something if it hadn't followed 7 years of silence and rejection. "Lauren," she began, her voice cracking like brittle glass, "I know we've had our differences, but family is family, sweetheart. We've all made mistakes, and your father and I, we just want to talk. We want to reconnect, maybe we could meet for dinner. Just talk through things. I miss you. We miss you." She paused before that last part like she had to force it through her teeth, like saying she missed me took actual effort, like she hadn't already buried me years ago without so much as a funeral. I played the voicemail twice, just to be sure I wasn't imagining the desperate, sugar-coated revision of history, the way she conveniently left out the fact that the last time we'd spoken, she couldn't even look me in the eyes as I walked out of their house pregnant and unwanted. A day later came the text from my father, short, cold, and distant, like he was sending a message to a business partner, not a daughter he'd discarded without a second thought. "I hear you've done well. We should talk." No apology. No warmth. Not even a damn question mark. Just that flat, formal tone like he was doing me a favor by reaching out, like he expected me to be grateful he'd finally acknowledged my existence again now that there was money involved. It was so absurd I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny, not really. It was just pathetic. And predictable. God, so damn predictable. Then came the pictures from my sister, Emily. A text filled with photos of her kids, 3 little faces I'd never met, dressed in matching outfits, posing beside a Christmas tree like something out of a catalog. The message underneath read, "They've heard about their cool aunt and want to meet their cousin. Family reunion soon." Like we were just long-lost pen pals catching up after a harmless misunderstanding. No mention of the fact that she hadn't returned a single one of my calls during my pregnancy, or that she'd ignored every birthday I sent for her kids, every olive branch I'd offered during those lonely, bitter years. They all acted like the last 7 years hadn't happened, like they hadn't erased me from their lives when I needed them most, like I was supposed to forget the humiliation, the struggle, the isolation. Like I was just supposed to show up now, dressed nicely, smiling politely, checkbook in hand, ready to play the good daughter again because now I had something they wanted. Money. Not love, not connection, not forgiveness, money. And then, as if that wasn't insulting enough, came the formal invitation, an email from Emily, glossy and polite, inviting me to a welcome back dinner at my parents' house. She called it a celebration of healing, complete with catered food, floral centerpieces, and a goddamn prayer circle at the end. I stared at that email for a long time, feeling a slow burn rise behind my ribs, the kind of heat that doesn't come from anger alone, it comes from insult. From the sheer audacity of people who think they can erase years of cruelty with casseroles and plastic tablecloths. They thought I'd just slide back into their lives like a puzzle piece that had been temporarily misplaced. They thought I'd forget the motel rooms, the eviction notices, the nights I'd held my crying son in the dark because I didn't have money for power. They thought I'd pretend none of it happened, just because now I could afford to sit at their table without shame. But shame was never mine to carry, it was theirs. Always had been. So yes, I agreed to come to the dinner. I sent a short reply, "I'll be there." Looking forward to it. And I was. Just not for the reasons they imagined. I didn't go to forgive them. I didn't go to pretend everything was fine or to hug and smile and pass the mashed potatoes like nothing had happened. I went to make damn sure they never forgot. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't rage, it's clarity. It's showing up with power in your pocket and scars on your skin and daring them to look you in the eyes and remember what they did. And trust me, I was going to give them a night they would never forget. I showed up at their house exactly 15 minutes late, not because I'd lost track of time or hit traffic, but because I wanted them to feel the weight of waiting for me. I wanted them to sit there under their chandelier, surrounded by their polished silverware and overpriced floral arrangements, fidgeting with wine glasses and silently wondering if I would actually show up at all. I wanted them uncomfortable, on edge, mildly humiliated, just a fraction of what I had felt during the years they discarded me like something inconvenient and unworthy. And when I finally did walk through that door, I made damn sure every head turned. I wore a black dress that fit like armor and heels that clicked sharply on the floor with every step, like punctuation marks in a sentence they were about to read whether they liked it or not. My hair was pulled back, my lipstick bold, and my face unreadable. I didn't smile when I saw them. I didn't hug. I didn't offer pleasantries or small talk or pretend for a single second that I was here for reconciliation. I simply nodded, took off my coat, and walked into that dining room like I owned the house, even though I'd once been thrown out of it like garbage. The table was set like something out of a wedding catalog, all matching napkin rings and name cards and fake warmth wrapped in expensive fabric. My mother hovered by the kitchen doorway, wringing her hands and flashing a strained smile that didn't reach her eyes. My father stood at the head of the table, trying to look dignified, but failing to hide the nervous twitch in his jaw. My sister sat with her husband, giggling softly, pretending everything was light and pleasant, but her eyes kept darting toward me like she was waiting for the big reveal, the moment the prodigal daughter would forgive, forget, and open her wallet. They tried to fill the room with idle chatter, the kind of bland, pointless conversation that people use when there's too much real history sitting like a ghost between the wine glasses. My mother asked how Noah was doing, like she hadn't ignored his entire existence since the day he was born. My father mumbled something about how proud he was of how far I'd come, like he hadn't told me I was ruining my life with that child. My sister showed me a photo of her kids on her phone and said maybe we could set up a play date, as if children were social experiments to mend broken bloodlines. I said nothing for most of the evening. I let them squirm. I watched them fumble through their fake smiles and weak apologies, dropping hints about how things have been tight financially, and how the roof needs repair, and how the church is doing a new community project. Every single one of them waiting, hoping, assuming that this would end with me giving them something they could spend. That I'd write a check, offer a loan, maybe even buy back the love they had refused to give me when I needed it most. But they didn't know me anymore, not really. They didn't understand that I hadn't come to soothe or fix or heal. When the dinner plates were cleared and the small talk finally died under the weight of awkward silence, I stood up. Every eye turned toward me, expectant and greedy. I could see it in their faces. This was the moment they thought they'd been working toward, the part where the daughter they discarded would reward their half-hearted effort with something tangible. And I let that silence stretch just long enough to feel heavy in their chests before I opened my mouth. "I've listened to everything you've said tonight," I began, keeping my voice steady, calm, almost gentle. "I've watched you pretend to care, to reconnect, to mend. And I want you to know I see right through it. Every word, every smile, every little sideways glance toward my purse or my hands, waiting to see what I'll give you. You don't want me back. You want my money." They tried to interrupt, of course, my mother gasping, my sister shaking her head, my father muttering something defensive, but I held up one hand and they all went quiet again. When I walked out of this house 7 years ago, I was scared, pregnant, and completely alone. And you let me go. Not one of you reached out. Not one of you checked in. Not one of you lifted a finger when I was eating canned soup and counting change for diapers. You didn't lose me because I had a child. You lost me because you couldn't love me without conditions. I paused, letting that sink in, watching their faces shift from fake concern to real discomfort, that slow unraveling of the narrative they'd built in their heads. And now, you think you get to rewrite history because I have money. You think a dinner and a few photos erase what you did. But here's the truth, you don't get to buy me back now. You lost that privilege the moment you turned your backs. Then I reached into my purse. Their eyes widened, anticipating the checkbook, the envelope, the grand gesture of financial forgiveness. And I did pull something out, but not what they expected. I laid a single white envelope on the table, slid it across the polished wood toward my father, and sat back down. My mother reached for it first, her hands trembling slightly, and opened it with a hopeful gasp that deflated instantly. It wasn't a check for them. It was a donation receipt, $40,000, donated in their names to a local shelter for single mothers. I smiled for the first time that evening, slow and sharp and cold. I figured if you wanted to help struggling families, I'd give you the chance to start. And just like that, every mask in the room cracked. For a moment, they just stared at that receipt on the table like it was some kind of mistake, like maybe they'd misunderstood what it meant or hoped there was something more hidden behind it. But there wasn't. No second envelope, no backup check, no quiet assurance that I'd help them out in private later. Just a donation to a local women's shelter, signed in their names, sealed in cold, undeniable finality. And that was the moment it happened, that subtle, barely audible shift in the room where the air grew heavy and raw truth settled in the corners like dust no one could ignore anymore. My father's face twisted first, the kind of rage that comes not from pain but from embarrassment, from being outmaneuvered, from realizing that the power he thought he still held over me had crumbled into nothing. He shoved his chair back so hard it scraped against the floor with an ugly screech, then stormed out of the room without another word. No dramatic speech, no shouting, no attempt to regain control. Just footsteps pounding down the hallway, followed by the sharp slam of the front door that echoed like a closing chapter. My mother, though, she broke differently. She sat there, hands clenched in her lap, eyes wide and glistening, but not with the performance tears she'd used before. This time there was no audience to impress, no prayer circle watching, no reputation on the line. Just a woman realizing that her daughter was gone in a way she couldn't undo, and that her legacy wasn't going to be polished church photos and perfect holiday cards anymore. It was this bitter harvest of silence and distance she had planted with judgment and shame. She sobbed quietly, not theatrically, not for show, but with the kind of sound that comes from regret digging its claws into the marrow. And maybe, just maybe, it was the first real emotion I'd seen from her in years. I didn't comfort her. I didn't reach across the table or offer a gentle word. Because I remembered what it felt like to be alone in that motel room, shaking with exhaustion, wondering how I would make it through another day with no one on my side. I remembered what it felt like to scream silently into a pillow while my baby cried beside me and no one came. So I stood up without saying anything else, picked up my coat, and walked toward the door. My heels tapped against the tile like punctuation again, sharp, final, deliberate. I didn't look back, not even when I heard my mother call my name in a whisper so soft it almost sounded like a prayer. I didn't owe them softness. Not anymore. And I sure as hell didn't owe them closure. But just as I stepped out onto the porch, I heard footsteps behind me, faster, lighter, desperate. I turned halfway, only to see Emily coming after me, her face streaked with tears, her voice trembling as she called out, "Lauren, please wait, just wait." She caught up to me, reached out like she might grab my arm but thought better of it. She stood there, swallowing hard, trying to find the words that had clearly been buried for far too long. "I was scared," she said, her voice cracking. Back then, I didn't know how to help. I didn't know what to say. I didn't mean to just disappear on you. I was overwhelmed and selfish, and God, I know I messed up. I stared at her for a long second, long enough to see the sincerity in her eyes, the pain, maybe even the guilt she'd been carrying quietly while the rest of the family pretended I'd never existed. And for a brief moment, I felt something flicker inside me, not forgiveness, not warmth, but something like the ghost of the bond we used to have before everything turned toxic and conditional. She looked at me, hope clinging to her breath. "Can we fix this?" she asked softly. I miss you. And maybe in some other life, in some other version of this story, I would have hugged her. I would have said yes. I would have believed that people could change without being forced to. But in this life, in this truth, I just shook my head once, slowly, and said the only thing I could without lying. "You had 7 years." Then I turned away, walked to my car, and didn't look back. Not when she cried again, not when she called my name, not when I pulled out of the driveway of the house that had once been mine, but never truly felt like home. I didn't cry either. Not this time. Because there's a difference between grieving what was lost and finally understanding what was never real in the first place. And as I drove through the streets of that town, passing the same old landmarks that had once held memories and now just looked like relics of someone else's life, I felt something lift off my shoulders, something heavy, something old, something that had kept me tied to the pain longer than I deserved. People think revenge means destruction, that it's fire and fury and slamming doors. But sometimes revenge is quieter than that. Sometimes it's building something beautiful out of the very rubble they left you buried under, and never letting them touch a single part of it again. A few weeks later, I opened my bakery. I called it Noah's Table. Not just because it sounded warm and inviting, but because everything I built, every ounce of success, every bit of healing, was for the little boy who made me strong before I ever had a dollar to my name. One of our first customers was a woman from the shelter I donated to, her arms wrapped around a sleeping baby, her eyes carrying the same tired hope I used to wear like armor. And just like that, the circle closed. Quietly. Fully. Without applause.